Okay, let's be honest. If you're watching this, then you're probably on your phone a fair bit. The average screen time is now 3 hours and 15 minutes, and 1 out of 5 of you are on for 4.5 hours. Yep. It's a lot. Not only is this chewing into our precious time, but it's also a major reason as to why we all feel so stuck, unmotivated, anxious, and depressed. Luckily, there's actually a really easy fix. Earlier this year, I did a 30-day dopamine detox. This meant no social media, no TV, no digital consumption whatsoever for 30 days. I went from feeling tired, unmotivated, and just overall feeling like I was in a rut to by the end of the 30 days feeling clear, focused, and honestly, the best I'd felt in years. There's just one major problem. It didn't stick. As the months have passed and the phone has been back in my life, slowly but surely, old habits have crept back in, and that amazing feeling of clarity has just become a distant memory. So, a few weeks ago, I asked myself this question. With the world being so digital, do we just have to accept that this is the way things go if we choose to have a phone in our lives? Or is there another way? To answer this question, over the last 14 days, I've been trying something that I think is going to change how I live my life forever. Okay, so a while back I came across an article called Dopamine Fasting 2.0 by a psychologist named Dr. Cameron Sepahs. This really intrigued me because it was the first time that I'd heard dopamine fasting talked about, not like it was pseudoscience, but backed by real science, used by real psychologists, and using real evidence-based practices, and claiming to give the same benefits of clarity, focus, and creativity. The difference here is rather than cutting out everything altogether, which, as we know, doesn't work, but rather taking an approach a little bit like intermittent fasting, where you go for periods without using your phone or whatever behavior you're trying to cut down on, and periods of intentional use. This was exactly what I'd been looking for, a way to get all the benefits of a dopamine detox, but just by altering your lifestyle slightly, something that you can stick to forever. With that being said, here's the new plan. No social media or TV after 6:30 p.m. at night. I'll be putting a 1-hour daily time limit on all social media apps, have dedicated time throughout the day where I sit down and look at social media. For me, this will be most likely during times when I eat, but the most important thing is that it's not in an impulsive nature. And lastly, delete all social media apps off my phone 1 day per week. For me, this will be a Sunday. Alrighty, so that was quick. I'm already locked out of my social media apps. I definitely didn't use it that long. I think it registered my podcast app as a social media app, and I listened to one on my walk this morning, which went for an hour. So that's that for today. I'm not too worried, obviously. I got a busy day of work ahead, but we will see how we go tonight. Alrighty, so it's night 1. Everything's been turned off since 6:30, and it's definitely quiet again, that's for sure. Might just have a shower, read for a little bit, and go to bed. All right, time to make some food. All right, first meal for the day, which means this is the time that I'm allowed to actually look at social media. So I'm gonna eat my food, watch a YouTube video or two, and then get back to work.
Solution to this problem of information overload is write things down.
It's not social media, right? I am kind of skeptical to know whether or not this way will be as good or make me feel as good as the first time when I just cut out everything, but only time will tell. The most important thing I wanted to get out of this experiment was to not only get back that feeling of focus and clarity, but to gain back my time so I can get back to focusing on good daily habits as they play such a pivotal role in my mental health. Firstly, I want to ensure that I'm taking at least 5 minutes per day to meditate or just sit and be alone with my thoughts. Get back to training regularly and with intention. Do at least 30 minutes of reading per day, get back to playing guitar more regularly, and do something uncomfortable every day. Alright, Monday morning. So yesterday I had no social media on my phone whatsoever. Probably not going to reinstall them until I really need them. I don't feel the need for it at all. Feeling good. Starting to feel that feeling of focus and clarity sneaking back in. I can definitely notice I'm feeling more present when I'm talking to someone and just overall feeling more clear. So starting to feel good. I then went home and built up the courage to jump into the ice bath, something I'd been putting off for months. I then got my meditation in, got my exercise in for the day, wrote into my journal, and suddenly within less than a week, I could already feel my life beginning to change. Honestly feels like fog has lifted. My first time under 100 kilos in almost 2 years. Let's go. Alrighty, so I've been putting off cleaning in here for months, but today's the day. When you haven't done it in a long time, it's definitely harder. Whew. It's cold. Alright, so it has officially been 1 week since I started Dr. Cameron's protocol, and I can confidently say that not only do I never want to go back to using social media like I was before, but that this is something that I can definitely stick to forever. How I feel now in comparison to a week ago is quite literally night and day. How clear I feel, how motivated I feel, and how focused I feel on the things that I want to be focused on. And this was just after a week. I can only imagine that after doing this for 6 months or a year or 5 years, that this feeling of productivity and motivation and focus and clarity will only compound over time. Knowing that this was now a lifestyle that I wanted to stick to forever, I wanted to learn as much about this as possible. So I decided to contact the man who created the very protocol that I was following, Dr. Cameron Sepahs, and he was kind enough to agree to an interview. Dr. Cameron is a clinical psychologist, med school professor, performance coach for VCs and CEOs in Silicon Valley, and is known for popularizing doing dopamine fasting the right way. What's the biggest difference between dopamine fasting 2.0 and what maybe a lot of people think it is, and maybe what it's been a little bit too popularized as?
Yeah, and the reason I called it that is because it's to differentiate the protocol that I developed and popularized, which is an evidence-based protocol that's based on CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is the gold standard psychotherapy. Essentially, it's the standard treatment for internet addiction. The challenge with the internet is that it's very hard, unlike drugs or alcohol, to abstain from it altogether. So it's almost like a binge eating addiction. You can't stay away from food. You have to figure out a way to incorporate food and internet in your life. And so as a result of that, abstinence-only models don't really work very well. There has to be some sort of moderation. It's not abstaining altogether from either dopamine or pleasure. Dopamine actually comes from the anticipation of reward. It doesn't come from, I'm using my phone, I'm getting a bunch of dopamine. So you can't avoid dopamine. You don't want to avoid dopamine. So the goal is not to reduce or minimize dopamine. It's not something we can really control anyway. It's to not be a slave to the habit, which is reinforced by dopamine.
So anytime we do anything impulsively, like pick up our phone when we're bored, we're just continually reinforcing that association between being bored and our phone. This is why you probably can't even remember the last time you went and sat on the toilet without your phone, because it's uncomfortable and our brains expect it. But is there more to our phone addictions than just dopamine?
Absolutely. If you think about it, the reason that anyone develops any sort of addiction is in order to numb, suppress, avoid, or distract themselves from uncomfortable feelings, right? Including sort of work-related, personal-related stress. Now, back in the day, if you were a guy, stereotypically speaking, you would drink, right, after work. And that's how people sort of numb and unwind, so to speak. Nowadays, it's even easier to do so because all you have to do is scroll through your social media, and the hyper-focus essentially is particularly addictive because it serves two functions from a behavioral perspective. One, there's negative reinforcement, and negative reinforcement meaning it takes away something that you don't want. Meaning that if you're feeling lonely, you're feeling bored, you're feeling stress, any sort of negative emotion, it numbs and suppresses that. And then obviously there's positive reinforcement in that it serves you interesting, novel, stimulating, clickbaity content that engages us and is not maybe as boring as our typical work or the boring bills and errands that we have to pay. And when you have that sort of what I call double reinforcement, you're numbing the negative feelings and you're inducing positive feelings, it becomes very, very addictive. And that's why I think we have essentially like these mild to moderate forms of addiction that's true for probably 80 to 90% of the population.
So of course, our phones are addictive. But is that the real issue? Looking back over the past year, I've had a pretty rough time in terms of stressful situations arriving in my life and continual sleep issues. And thinking back, those are the times where my phone usage has been at an all-time high. It's just a really slippery slope once you're on that road. There has never been a better time not to deal with our emotions. Whether we're bored or lonely or tired, we don't ever have to really experience those emotions because we don't have to. We've always got a distraction just waiting for us in our pockets. Alrighty, so it's officially been 14 days. I'm actually up to day 16 now, but this has been an incredible success. I'll be honest, this has far exceeded my expectations. I did not expect to feel this different from such a small change in my life. I feel like I've said this a lot over the past 2 weeks, but I'm really finding it difficult to find any other word to describe how I feel other than just really clear. I feel like I've missed out on absolutely nothing. I think I've been on Instagram maybe 2 or 3 times over the past 2 weeks. I find that having a time limit on my social media apps makes me much more intentional about the things that I want to consume. And knowing that I only have an hour, I'm much less likely to just aimlessly scroll at things that I quite honestly don't really care about. So moving forward, I'm going to be doing the exact same protocol that I've been following for the past 2 weeks, but as Dr. Cameron suggests, I'm going to be making sure that every 12 weeks or so, I delete all the social media apps off my phone for a full week. As much as this last 2 weeks has been great, there have been times where I did not feel like going to the gym or working, and there will be plenty more times like that. But what I've found over the last 2 weeks with something as simple as just being more intentional with my social media and technology use is I'm much less likely to listen to the inner voice telling me not to do the hard thing. So although motivation is always fleeting, we can never really truly be motivated 100% of the time, we can at the very least stack the cards in our favor by doing something as simple as being more intentional with our phones. Alrighty guys, thank you so much for watching to the very end. I put an absolute massive amount of time and effort into these videos, so it'd mean the world to me if you could like and subscribe. And with that being said, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.